Hey kids, it's Mrs. Donahue, and the squeaking noise you hear is Amelia, the puppy. She's my assistant today. I've only had to yell at her twice. This is the continuation of the History of America PowerPoint. You should be on the second day, which is like the second half of the videos. You should already have done Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, Colonialism, and the Crucible. Now we're moving into Scarlet Letter. So in the Crucible, one of the interesting things was I kept saying Judge Hathorne, Judge Hathorne, Judge Hathorne. Judge Hathorne was a hanging judge at Salem, which means he was responsible for signing off on the executions of several people. You know, because they were witches. His grandson is Nathaniel Hawthorne. Purposely started spelling his name with a W in it, so it goes from not having a W to having a W. The reason being, the Hawthorne and Hathorne family, like many of the Salem families, didn't move out of Salem after the witch trials. So even though they killed almost 100 people in like a couple months and took their land and ruined their lives, they just kept all living together. That doesn't create a lot of social tension. Hawthorne, Nathaniel Hawthorne, felt really guilty about the legacy of Salem and particularly his grandfather's role. Like his grandfather was responsible for killing people in the town. When he writes the Scarlet Letter, even though he is 2 generations after Puritanism is kind of over and done, he is writing about Puritanism. And he writes one of the best versions of Puritanism in early American colonial life that we have. The thing about Scarlet Letter, it's way too long. Classes that read it are actively reading it until at least December. It's like a 400-page novel. It's an amazing novel. If you remotely like what I'm talking about, you should go read it. It is free in the public domain. You can definitely find free online copies. The problem with it is 400 pages, and a lot of it is descriptions of landscape. That was a really popular stylistic choice people made straight through the early part of the 1900s. The reason being, many people didn't travel far. So if you did travel somewhere and you were in a different location, the book was much more likely to travel than other people were. So the books were meant to act sort of like travel guides. You know, they're living in Boston, and Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing about, Boston, Salem, Massachusetts area, but this book is getting sold everywhere. So people who have never come to America can kind of understand what America looks like from these descriptions. Hang on. So, in other words, if you were to cut out half of the landscape descriptions in Scarlet Letter, the book itself's amazing. The characters, the plot, it's really good. And whenever I describe it to students, like when you guys get through this PowerPoint, a lot of you are going to say like, oh, that sounds like an amazing book. I'm going to choose to only show you certain portions of the book. I'm not going to do the whole book with you. I just don't have it in me to kill a book I love by doing it for 4 months. I just don't. I don't have it in me. So as we look at the assignments that you have for the PowerPoint, you should be done with Crucible. I am assuming that you heard those portions before I go forward. So the next thing is Scarlet Letter, Puritans in Practice. So Scarlet Letter and Young Goodman Brown, which occasionally I give you. I haven't made the decision yet about whether you're getting Young Goodman Brown. They are looking at the hypocrisy of Puritanism and how Puritanism really ruined a lot of good people. In other words, it made the behaviors you needed to have were so unachievable that it really made people crazy. And, we can reflect and see that now, but when Puritanism was in place, obviously we didn't see that. For Scarlet Letter, here's the plot. You have Hester Prynne. She's your main character. She is a Puritan woman who came to America. She came to America. Her husband sent her ahead of him to get the household started, which was common enough. Like one member of the household would go on. Her husband was an older scholarly guy who was still in England finishing something up, and he sends her to get the house started. Well, it's been like more than 5 years since she was sent to America, and he was supposed to come, and he's not there, and there's no word from him. So we're kind of going like, maybe he's not coming. Now, out of the blue, she becomes pregnant and has a baby. The book opens with her in a prison, being walked out of prison holding a newborn, because obviously something happened. She is forced to wear, very famously, the Scarlet Letter, a letter A on her chest. It would have taken up your whole chest. The letter A is for adultery, which means having an affair when you're married. She is thrown in prison because having the baby revealed that she had had an affair. She can't hide the fact that the baby is now in existence. And as religious as they were not buying sort of divine intervention on this. So she is put in prison to shame her, but the real punishment for the adultery is both the baby itself and the letter. She wears those every day, right? She can't get rid of them. The reason that they get really angry with her is they say, who was your lover? Who is the person you had the affair with? And she refuses to name names. So every day they walk her to a podium, and the podium is pictured on your PowerPoint. The podium would be in the middle of town, and you would have had to walk everywhere in town. So like even to get water, even to get food, even to get, minor things. Sorry. So the podium would have been very public. She's put on it, and the purpose of the podium is humiliation. So when you're standing on the podium, the idea is everyone walks by you, and they're not supposed to ignore you. They are supposed to remind you of your terrible, sinful, bad behavior. So they are screaming at you. They are throwing things at you. They are calling you names. And they're meant to. They're encouraged to. They make her a very, easy offer in their minds. And they said, you will be able to walk down from the podium. You will be able to remove the letter if you tell us who your lover is. And she's like, no. And kind of makes a comment like, it's on him to say it. I'm not going to say it. Meanwhile, the town minister's like, please, save his soul by revealing him. And she's like, nope, his job. You got to respect it. In the picture I have of the public podium, it's also called, you could have a pillory on there. The picture I have is the people in the stockades. Stockades were one way they would have forced you to stand on the pillory if you were trying to escape it. Hester was not put in the stockades because she takes her punishment. She's told to stand on the podium, and she stands on the podium. She's told to bring the baby with her. She brings the baby with her. Since she obeys, there's no reason to force her to do it. And she takes this punishment every single day. The other picture next to the podium is something called a scold's bridle. Scold's bridle. Bridle like what you put on a horse. A scold's bridle was a metal and leather mask-type device that is meant to force the tongue of a woman down, sometimes with a nail or nails, sharp objects, sometimes just with tampered down metal clamps. The idea being that women's behavior was very linked to their speaking. So if you spoke too much, you would have this put on you to try and salvage your reputation and your bad behavior. Underneath the picture of the pillory and the scold's bridle, you have another image of a woman with a scold's bridle, and you see that she's wearing a collar that has her sin on it. The Puritans were incredibly into public shaming. If you did something wrong, they had to tell everyone. The entire town knew, and you were encouraged to rat out your neighbors. So if you saw someone else doing something bad, it was considered your duty to save them by correcting them, by revealing it to everyone. You also have whipping in the next picture. And underneath it, you have a picture of an adulterous couple being led through town. They're both on like a rope leash, and they're being led by somebody who is essentially announcing, as he's walking them, announcing to town, these two people have committed adultery together. These two people have committed adultery together. Again, shaming was the cornerstone of Puritan thinking. And you have another person in another picture wearing their sin on their chest. So it's common that Hester would have to wear that giant A. Hester is, my hero in so many ways. Hester names her daughter Pearl. And in one of my favorite passages from the book, she names her daughter Pearl as being of great price, purchased with all she had, her mother's only treasure. So A frequent question I get from students at this time is, if it was so bad to have this baby out of wedlock, could she not have done something about it? Well, for as long as there has been unwanted pregnancies, there have been methods of trying to get rid of them. They are all, to a rule, especially in this time period, dangerous. They could harm the mother or kill the mother in trying to get rid of the child. In Great Books, we watch a show called Alias Grace, and it includes a woman trying to have an abortion from an unwanted baby and dying from it because they didn't really understand medicine, and it's an incredibly delicate process anyway. Hester chooses not to try to get rid of Pearl from everything we understand. She understands she's pregnant, and she's understanding that she will pay for this with everything she has. She will lose her reputation. She will no longer be able to be employed in the town. She will no longer be able to live in the town. She'll have to be completely on her own with this baby. And she doesn't really, I think, suspect that the father will help. At least she decides that that is his thing to decide, not hers. So when she says, I name her Pearl, for I bought her with all I had, real pearls are incredibly rare. That's what makes them so expensive, because it's just a pearl is a flaw. It's sand that gets stuck in an oyster, and as the oyster tries to expel the sand, it develops the pearl. So you could have 1,000 oysters and have one pearl. It's just a random event. I really love that about Hester and Pearl. Hester uses the A on her chest to her advantage as well, so she's clever. And it's hard to find well-represented novels that show women as intelligent without also showing them as unlikable from this time. That's why some of these books, older books like Pride and Prejudice or Sense and Sensibility or Jane Eyre, they appeal to us because they show us intelligent women responding to the conditions they're in without making these women unlikable. Although I do hate Jane Eyre. That's a totally different story. Hester has this A on her chest. Part of what's going on, the puppy's playing with her toy. Part of what's going on with the A on her chest is she must wear it every day. It has to be fully displayed. Everyone has to know that she committed this crime. So this girl, she says it's not only going to be an A, and it's going to be red. Everything Puritans would have worn would have been extremely modest. I mean, head to toe black, and hair coverings, like very, very plain. So it's a bright red A, which would stand out anyway. And what happens is Hester is an amazing embroiderer. So she does delicate needlework, and she decorates the heck out of the A. She buys gold thread. She buys like baby gems and stuff, and she decorates the A and makes it this elaborate, beautiful A. And also because she knows that Pearl is going to be stared at. First of all, naming her Pearl and not humiliation or patience or silence. Like she names her Pearl as being something valuable. She dresses Pearl very differently than how other people are dressing their kids. So Puritans didn't really believe in a childhood. You were just a mini adult, so you were dressed like a mini adult. If the women are wearing neck to ankle, long sleeve caps that are all black wool, that's what the kids are wearing. She makes Pearl look like a little mini Disney princess. Pearl is always wearing red. She is frequently wearing expensive fabrics like silks and velvets that are made into these elaborate princess costumes. And she looks like a little mini fairy princess. Beautiful, hard to make things. Why is Hester doing that? Because she can make them. She makes them with her own two hands. This is a rare skill set that people are willing to pay for, because not everyone can do it. And she's advertising. You're all going to be looking at the A and you're all going to be looking at the baby. So look, and look carefully at what they're wearing. The townspeople are encouraged to treat her poorly, and they do. They fall right into that role. They're told they can call her names, so they do. They're told that they don't have to be nice to her, so they're not. They're told that they can like snub her. Their kids don't have to play with her kid. They don't have to assist her with anything, so they don't. She goes from living in the town to having to get her own house just outside of town. And she continues to be polite to them, no matter what they do. So they can literally like shoulder check her, or they can knock all of her groceries over, and she will just say good morning. I'm not saying she does it in a timid way. That's not the description we get in the book. Not that she's timid or scared of them, but that she's like, good morning. This happened to me once. Somebody was like really unnecessarily rude to me all the time. And I was like, I could be rude back. Or I could just every day look them directly in the eye and say, good morning. Until they're almost uncomfortable with my level of politeness and civility. It works. If you look, there's another picture of one of the movie representations of Hester holding Pearl. The only thing I don't like about this is that she's wearing a red dress instead of Pearl wearing a red dress. It should be Pearl wearing the red. But you see the gold fabric on the A that Hester uses to make it decorative. Then there's an illustration of Hester with little Pearl, and that's a little more accurate. That Hester was wearing black, has the red A on her chest, and that Pearl has the red dress. So Hester's husband, who has been gone for more than 5 years, and everyone kind of assumed he was never coming to America, returned on the day that Hester was paraded around from the prison with her newborn baby. So he understands what's happened, and he decides he will not reveal himself to be her husband. They both know that he is, but no one else in town knows them. So he's not going to say that he's her husband. He comes into town and calls himself Roger Chillingworth. He's an old guy. He's always been old. He was always a lot older than Hester. He's a scholar. He's very smart, knows a lot of things. And when he sees Hester, they call him to Hester because he says, I'm like a doctor, basically. And they're like, well, go check her out because she just had a baby. We don't know what's going on. And he goes into the prison cell alone with her, and she's like, are you here to kill me or my baby? And he says, no, this is your thing. You did this to yourself. You deal with it. Do not tell anyone that I'm your husband. Do not tell anyone my real name. Their marriage is described by Hester as not a particularly great marriage. Not that he hurt her, but that he neglected her. She was a lot younger than him. She was a lot prettier than him. And he was obsessed with knowledge to the point where he would just lock himself away for weeks at a time and not pay any attention to her. Then when he sends her to America and she's alone for years, it's almost no shock that she would cheat on him. It's not like they have a love match anyway. It was very uncommon to have love matches at this time. Most people did not marry for love. They had arranged marriages in some way. Meanwhile, change pace. Arthur Dimmesdale is the town minister, and everybody loves Dimmesdale. He is a universally loved minister. Many people think that he is preaching against Hester, and she is told to come to church all the time anyway. She has to listen to these sermons. He uses her as a cautionary tale, but he often tells people, go into your own souls and look for sin on yourselves. And a lot of people just go, he cannot be talking about me. I don't sin. But that Hester Prynne, she should really look to herself. But who's Dimmesdale also referring to, really? I mean, they don't know who the father is of the baby. Someone should look inside themselves and talk about their own sin and their own role in everything. The thing about Hester's baby is that everyone really wants to know who the father is, but no one knows. Right? She's the only one. Only her and the father know who he is. And everyone is sort of, in the beginning, intensely interested about who the father is. And then they realize she won't say anything, and the father's not saying anything. And how are you supposed to find him then? We start early on in the book to get a little suspicious of Dimmesdale because he is the only one sympathetic to Hester. He cautions that behaving this way is obviously a sin and wrong, but when people are going at her, he goes, know ye not, this woman has suffered sufficiently and her sin is between her and her God, and she clearly carries the child with her, and she has been punished. We need not further punish her. So clearly he's just a nice guy, right? That's clearly the answer. The townsmen, all of whom are obviously, I should say that the highest ranking people in the town, who are obviously all men, they get together at one point, and the novel jumps through. So at the beginning of the novel, Pearl is newborn. Now we're a couple years in, and she's a toddler. Now the problem with her being a toddler, and even a baby, is that they realize it's a lot of work on a mother to be a single mother in this time trying to sustain her own household. It was not designed to be sustainable by especially a lone woman. So they debate with one another. They're like, the baby's young enough. Maybe we should take her away from Hester and give her to people who are more moral, more worthy of raising a child, especially a girl. She overhears this conversation because I mentioned that she was a really good seamstress, right? Apologies, Apple. So the governor hired Hester to make him gloves, decorated, intricate made gloves. Hester's been hired by the townspeople to make almost anything that is highly decorative. So women are wearing collars, even though Puritans are not supposed to be into looks and what they wear, even though that's considered like, pride and vanity, which are deadly sins. Hester is hired constantly to design children's clothes, fancy dress costumes, good jackets, gloves, handkerchiefs, all that stuff. The only thing they will not hire Hester to make is a bridal gown. They think of that as bad luck. But when she comes to deliver the governor's gloves, she overhears the townsmen talking about taking Pearl away. So she looks pretty much directly at Dimmesdale and she goes, "You need to fix this and explain why they are not taking this baby from me." And the governor's argument was Hester is a bad woman. So if you leave a girl to be raised by her, the girl will also be a bad woman, and there'll be no chance for Pearl to be good. And a lot of the men agree with this. Pearl is old enough that she can talk, and their problem with Pearl is that she's not a well-behaved child. Puritans were strict with their kids. I mean, if you said, shh, they jumped in line. God, yes. So the thing that really upsets the gentlemen in the room is that they look at Pearl, who is hopping around the governor's mansion like she owns the place, playing with everything, and Hester's kind of letting her behave like this because, frankly, Hester doesn't feel... She's been judged enough. She's not here to, please you. And when the men say, "Hello, sweetheart, who is your father?" The correct answer would have been God. The correct answer to a child would have been God. That's the correct moral education for these children. They would have been taught the Bible before anything else. Most of them, if they could not read other things, they could read the Bible, which means that they could memorize the Bible. But Pearl says, "Oh, I have none. I am my mother's." When they ask who her father was, "I have none. I am my mother's child. I am my mother's Pearl." And they're like, how does she not know her Bible? This is very bad. This woman committed adultery, and now she's not even teaching the kid the Bible. And Hester literally looks directly at Dimmesdale and says, you will intervene. Hint. Sincere hint. Hester says, "Pearl is like my letter. I wear her constantly as a reminder of my sin and a punishment for my sin. And I can better teach Pearl the consequences of that sin than anyone. And if God gave her to me, there must have been a reason for God to give her to me." And Dimmesdale takes her side. And because he takes her side, the townsmen are persuaded to let her keep Pearl. Again, not suspicious at all. He's just a nice guy, right? During all of this, again, Pearl is very wild and atypical of a Puritan child. She is also only listening to really two people, or affectionate to two people. Any other adult who says anything to Pearl, she pretty much dismisses out of hand. She doesn't listen to them. She does whatever she wants, but she listens to her mom. Normally, she's still wild, so I don't want it to make it sound like Hester says, "Pearl, stop," and Pearl just comes to heel. But Pearl knows when her mother's being serious and when her mother's not being serious. There's a whole lot of times that Hester's like, "Whatever, be you, kid." And she doesn't really care about punishing Pearl for her behavior. The only other person she's affectionate to is Dimmesdale. Totally. For no reason, right? It's just a random reason. Whenever Dimmesdale is around her, she teases him too. And she points to his chest. Because Dimmesdale's developed this weird twitch where he rubs at his chest a lot. just rubs at his chest. Like he'll just be talking and he'll rub at his chest, particularly when Hester's around and Pearl. He rubs at his chest. Throughout the story, Dimmesdale's been getting more and more sick. People are really worried because illness, killed people, and they didn't have much in the way of great medicine. And he's grabbing his chest a lot and grabbing his heart, and they're very worried that he's going to have some sort of sickness in his chest that they won't be able to shake and he'll die young. And he's so beloved by the town that they ask him to move in with Dr. Roger Chillingworth, who nobody besides Hester realizes is Hester's husband, who has sworn vengeance on whoever humiliated him by sleeping with his wife. This is going to get good. Chillingworth is really smart. And as somebody who's really smart, and also, by the way, old and hideous, but he's really smart, he pretty much guesses that Dimmesdale is the lover. Of course Dimmesdale's the lover. Taking her side, letting her keep the baby. While she has a letter on her chest, he's always going like this with his chest. Like, readers pick up on it. The townspeople don't, because they don't want to believe anything wrong about Dimmesdale. But Chillingworth guesses it. And one night when Dimmesdale's asleep, Chillingworth opens Dimmesdale's shirt, sees something on his chest, and is fully vindicated and is like, this is the guy who did it. So then he's trying to plot his revenge. Like, how do I take revenge upon them now? So he keeps watching them. And Hester's watching Chillingworth and Dimmesdale because she's like, I wonder what's going on there. Is Chillingworth just going to act like his doctor? Is Chillingworth going to do something bad? She's concerned that Chillingworth will actually hurt Dimmesdale. And she doesn't want Dimmesdale to get hurt. Sorry, I had to take a phone call. I'll be honest with you, I hope I'm in the right spot. So, Chillingworth. Chillingworth was never good looking and he was always old. But his revenge obsession, especially with Dimmesdale, starts taking on this worrisome component where it physically ruins him. Like, he begins to look worse and worse until he kind of vaguely resembles like Quasimodo. Like, his deformity becomes connected to the fact that he cannot let it go. He desperately wants to get that revenge, and all else kind of falls to the side. Hester eventually arranges a meeting with Dimmesdale, and before this, she had looked at Chillingworth kind of concerned and said, listen, this is turning you into something much darker than you ever were. I am going to tell Dimmesdale who you are. And he didn't think she would. Dimmesdale, when he meets with Hester, you can tell that they had a relationship. They embrace, he tells her he worries about her. And she says, okay, Chillingworth is actually my husband. And Dimmesdale has the nerve to get mad at her for keeping secrets. For keeping secrets, person who has never revealed that you are the father of her child. Look at yourself. Dimmesdale and Hester, I get over that. I don't know how. I would kill him. Me as 17-year-old me who first read this book thought Dimmesdale was such a romantic, tragic hero. And like 32-year-old me wants to hit him. Like, what do you mean you're mad at her? Excuse me. What have you done to help besides kind of telling someone she was allowed to raise her own kid? What have you done? Dimmesdale and Hester decide that the only safe thing for them to do is to run away. If they get on the next boat that's leaving for England, they can take Pearl, they can say they were married, they can say it's their legitimate child, and they can just leave all of this behind. She won't have to wear the Scarlet Letter anymore. Dimmesdale becomes actually really excited by that prospect. He kind of says, more or less, if you hadn't been married, I would have married you. None of this would have been a problem. Even if they knew that Chillingworth was dead. The problem is that they didn't know that he was dead or alive. He was just missing, so you had to assume he was alive. And therefore she could not marry another man. If they knew Chillingworth had died, she would have been allowed to remarry. It was the big question mark. You had to assume that her husband was alive. Dimmesdale really wants to leave and escape because he's suffocated by the fact that everyone in town loves him and thinks he's so moral and wonderful, but he knows that he's a sinner. And as he realizes that he's going to get away with it, it actually bothers him. So the day that they were set to leave for England, or the day before, there's this big open forum, like, last sermon that he's going to give. And he's considering revealing himself at this. Pearl totally calls him out, by the way. She was like, you should, because they're in the woods. They're deep in the woods. So he's holding Hester's hand, and he's holding Pearl's face, and he's hugging her, and he's holding Pearl's hand, and Pearl's loving it. She's like, yes. And she looks at him and goes, why will you not hold my hand in the town? You should hold my hand and Mama's hand in the town. And, like, stab me in the heart. Love when kids say stuff like that. Chillingworth, again, because he's extremely smart, like, he understands that when they met and then they suddenly, like, very suspiciously started packing, that they were going to leave. And he swears to Hester that he will follow them to another country, that he will expose them, that he is going to ruin them. So Hester and Dimmesdale are still kind of wondering, oh, should we leave, should we not? Like, what's going on with this Chillingworth guy? But we're going. We're going to leave and hope that it's better. For Dimmesdale, he gets to his last sermon, and he lets loose. So he gets on the podium, the entire town is there, and he goes, listen, all of you. For her entire life, you have been nasty to this woman because of her sin. She has been kind to you. In fact, she has done more charitable good work for people in this town than any of you. She doesn't make much money, and she gives to the poor. She helps the sick of this town. People who don't have a home, she gives clothes and stuff to. She is the best person in this town. And in fact, throughout the course of the book, many people start joking about the A on her chest and saying that it's not for adultery, it's for angel or Abel, someone who is helping and doing all these good works that the rest of them talk a good game about doing but don't actually perform. And Dimmesdale is just calling out these people like, you have her make this for you and you have her do this and none of you have ever helped her and she helps everyone. And he says, all of you are only concerned with appearances. That's why you employ her. You say that you're not vain, but you beg for these beautiful clothes and you only care that it looks like you're not a sinner. You only care that you look good in all the ways that you could be good. You only care what people see. And then boom, rips open his shirt and there's some weird stuff going on. So the thing that he had on his chest, either it's hard to understand when you're reading the book. There is a red A on Dimmesdale's chest. I often read it as when he was doing this, he's actually scratching himself, and he scratched an A into his chest just with constant guilt and worry that he clawed an A into his chest, and it's like a red infected seeping wound. Other times it's portrayed as like a manifestation, as though he had an allergic reaction to BS that manifested in a giant red A. So like some people portray it as a rash that happens to look like a red A. Other people portray it like it's been torn into his skin. Some people portray that he like cuts it into his skin. He has an A on his chest. I am the daddy. And then he openly says, come, Hester, come, Pearl, and brings them up on the podium and embraces them in front of the town and said, I love this woman, and this is my child. And then dies. He drops dead. He is not an old man. You don't have to deal with any of the fallout, do you? You just get to have everything. You get to tell everybody how awful they are, like get your last hug and die. Hate him now. Chillingworth is so distraught by the fact that he doesn't get to have the moment of rubbing Dimmesdale's face in the reveal that he dies. Like a couple days later, he's like, well, I got nothing left, and he dies. But he's wealthy and well-established, and he leaves everything to Pearl, because why not? So Hester and Pearl now inherited a lot of wealth, and they leave. Now, here's the thing. If Hester leaves the town, who's to say she has to keep wearing that letter, right? But she does. She wears it for the rest of her life. Pearl, we hear, kind of grows up as a beautiful, well-established woman who does fine for herself. And the last scene we get is at the end of the book. An old Hester, old Hester, returns to the town, still wearing the A, and asks to be buried next to Dimmesdale. So when she dies, the two of them have a tombstone next to each other or in between each other. And it's a black stone with just the red A on it, like the shame symbol. So there's a lot of poetry here. The takeaways. Obviously, women were bearing the greater punishment for the same crime. That is a continuous theme throughout the book. Like, what does Dimmesdale have besides his own personal guilt? He doesn't have a child to look after. He doesn't have any financial ruin from this. Pardon, that's one of you. Ooh, class is starting. So, one last thing to discuss with Scarlet Letter, the takeaways. The emphasis on shaming everybody, because if you're too busy yelling at someone else, nobody's looking at you, right? I don't have to deal with my own bad behavior because we're too busy looking at other people. That's what's going to happen. The big question becomes, should you have to apologize publicly for private behavior in order to have good public opinion? The Puritans were like, shaming people is the only way to get them to behave. But it's still a problem now. Think about social media culture. Do we honestly care if a celebrity cheats on their wife? Do we? Do we honestly care? Does it affect us? Or do we just like it when they have to grovel and apologize? Because if you look, when they apologize, we're like, he did a bad thing. But he apologized. And if they don't, we want to hold it against them, even though it's not our job to do this. It's not our job to decide guilt and innocence. Other people's private behavior and how it affects them really should not be our job to police, right? And we have other things that we established in the country, like the First Amendment, to protect our ability to give opinion. So, related to this, bet you're wondering how Scarlet Letter connects to the modern age. You have an article called the Jeb Bush and Modern Sex Shaming article. Read that article. There are currently no reading comp questions with it, but I will tell you, everybody always loves this article. That is real. This is real legislation that happened. So go check it out. That is what your assignment is. And I am going to come back and do a different video for the Founding Fathers. Catch you guys later.